What's up? What's up? Y'all, welcome back to the Sean P Experience. All of my shows are unique and special, but this particular show is a very special show, an amazing topic, very serious topic that we all need for the community, for our development and our growth. I have the author, Edwin Raymond, here with groundbreaking book, Inconvenient Cop, right? My fight to change policing in America. What a topic. Policing in America. We all see what's going on historically and what's going on right now. And this brother's book is groundbreaking, man. Go to the Sean P Experience, my brother.
Thank you for having me, King, and thank you for taking the time, to see what I have to offer in this memoir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let me do your official introduction. So we have Edwin Raymond, a recently retired NYPD lieutenant, civil rights activist and author of the riveting new memoir, Negation Cop, My Fight to Change Policing in America. The recipient of the NAACP Courage Under Fire Award, International Documentary Association Courage Under Fire Award, and the IDA Doc Star of the Month. He has appeared on the Trevor Noah podcast, CNN with Anderson Cooper, Freakonomics Radio, NBC with Sarah Wallace, Michael Sinan with Amy Goodwin, ABC News, and various other outlets. He currently resides in Brooklyn, New York. Brooklyn stand up. There you go, my brother.
All right, King, I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. So a little speed round before we get to the mean stuff. You from Brooklyn, you're in Brooklyn. Who is your favorite rapper out of New York? Your favorite New York rapper?
Honestly, it's Jada Kiss, man.
The Kiss.
Sure.
Kiss of Death.
Yeah.
Kiss of Death.
Jada Kiss, yeah.
Okay. I'm from Louisiana, of course, but I'm a long time Biggie Smalls fan. I'm a long time Jada Kiss fan, things of that nature. So totally shout out to that, my brother. Yeah, yeah. You mentioned earlier in the book about as a kid having this artist background, man, and wanting to draw comics and things like that. I appreciate that part of your book with the artistry journey. So my question is, who is your favorite all-time like comic? Your favorite superhero?
It's a good question. Big Spider-Man, man.
Spider-Man. Give me a why. Why out of all the people? Why Spider-Man?
Because I feel Peter Parker, right? I think he balances life more as a real person than probably any other superhero. He's not a billionaire, he's an average person, and throughout the comics, he's balancing real life issues that we could all relate to,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's why I love Batman so much because Batman, like he ain't had the radiation, spider bite, or all this stuff. He's a regular guy with his mind and his skills and his resources, but
his resources, you can't leave that part out. He's a billionaire.
He has a privilege. He has a privilege, right? But he's still a man, he's still a regular guy, so I like that. My next thing for you was, so I want to talk about the book cover and the title of the book, right? This book cover, of course, the Haitian heritage. Does that play any part with the color scheme and what we're seeing right here in the book?
Yeah, I mean, it's more so Pan-Africanist. So, my heritage is Haitian, but the way that I was raised, the way that I see the world, our play is the same. No matter where we are in the hospital, our play is the same. So I don't care if you're in love of Burkina Faso or Shreveport, Louisiana, or Brooklyn, New York, you're my brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Even, I want to say this, even when you take the cover off the book, the jacket cover, I love this part. Because whenever I'm traveling, I take the cover off my book. I saw this. I was like, bruh.
Yeah, it's a beautiful design. It's a beautiful design.
Great touch. So the Inconvenient Cop, the title of the book, tell me about the title choice.
Well, it's twofold because the type of police officer that I was inconvenient to the system because I didn't simply go along to get along, right? But I'm also inconvenient to the narrative, the typical narrative about cops also. So for those that think just the minute you join a force, the minute you put on a uniform, that you have to compromise who you are. I mean, listen, it's great risk to not do it, but I'm inconvenient to that argument because I showed, with my life, with my grit, what it means to really join a police department and focus on the people.
Yes, sir. I know sometimes on a major publishing company, you have options on book covers and titles. Were there any
Hmm.
other images you wanted to use in titles? And if so, whenever the paperback roll out, will it be a
Yeah,
different cover on your paperback rollout versus this?
yeah, that's a good question, man. I honestly didn't want to. I didn't want to be in uniform on the cover, only because I know, I need people to really get this information. And I know some people, I know what that uniform means to some people. And I know, unfortunately, some people, they're going to see that and think that there's nothing of value in this book for them. And the book's the furthest thing from the truth. So to make sure that the people tune in and take the time to listen or read, I didn't want to be in uniform. In terms of title, the title that we played around with was a rip-off of, it was inspired by a Jean-Michel Basquiat painting. It's called The Irony of a Negro Policeman. So originally I wanted
Mm,
to name, yeah, I wanted to name the book just that, but then the word Negro. So we settled on The Irony of a Black Cop, because no one really says policeman anymore. So The Irony of a Black Cop, but for different reasons we went with An Inconvenient Cop. And the subtitle was always going to be the same: My Fight to Change Policing in America.
Let me give my Sean P opinion whenever I saw the book, right?
Hmm.
A lot of us in society, we all have our assumptions about police, and we have our own little myth in the hood about certain things. But seeing a
Yeah.
person on the inside, that made me more drawn to it. Like, man, this dude
Mhm.
actually went through the process. He been through the day to day of it. His opinion is
Mhm.
way different than a person just talking about policing. Like,
Yeah.
he walked that walk. That drew me to
Yeah.
it, if anything.
Yeah. I mean, that was the point, you know what I mean? Because yeah, it's a different perspective. It's a different perspective. It's a needed perspective, and most importantly, it puts together a lot of information into one source.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh yeah, this book right here alone, I could have had 40
Wow.
questions in this book. So my point is, it could definitely be used as a comprehensive guide for a lot of things. After school programs, other kind of programs. There's definitely a lot packed in one book. And footnotes as well. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you
So
kind of.
my
It was a
next
little
thing,
glitchy.
I'm sorry.
It
I'm
was a
sorry.
little bit of a glitch. Yeah.
Okay. My next thing was your book launch. You had a very unique book launch. So
Yeah.
those that don't know, I'm a theater guy. I have a theater background. I love the stage. Tell me about out of all the choices, your choice to do a theater dramatization for the book launch.
Absolutely. Shout out to my project manager. Wonderful person, Disney Foot. We were, she was helping put together the event. And originally I was going to do audio, well, video, really. Um, Basically, you will hear the audio recording of my voice, and we were going to basically match it with the right videos and images. And then, she just kind of threw it out there as an idea. Imagine if we did theater. And I was crazy enough to try it, and we did it, and it was definitely successful. The audience definitely appreciated it. It was a very different way of presenting a book, very for a book launch specifically. I mean, obviously, books have been adapted to plays, etc. But to do it as a book launch, that was very unique, and I'm glad that we did it.
So again, I know whenever the paperback comes out, most times it's a whole nother tour, a whole nother
Hmm.
run. Are you going to do more of the dramatizations in the future, maybe, or is that something else you're going to do something else?
Well, I mean, it's in the discussions. Nothing is confirmed, but it's definitely in the discussions. Yeah.
And while I said it twice already, when is the paperback release? Is there a tentative date on that, or
Not right as of right now. I don't have a date. I'm
okay,
looking forward, but there's no date right now.
okay? Well, let's transition right there, right fast. So I did the audio book and the physical. You did your own narration. Now I
Hmm.
know doing myself. Audio books are tough to do.
Hmm.
I want to know. Give me your experience in the booth and like how many takes you was doing, cause it's tough.
Yeah, it was a lot. I have a deep respect for those that, not only authors that do their own books, but people that do the recordings in general. It took 4 days, and it was about 7 hours each day. Yeah, it was a lot.
So my experience, I did 3 audiobooks myself. For you to do this much content and this topic in short age is admirable. And your natural speaking voice and cadence and your rhythms, it made a perfect, enjoyable listen, man. I was listening to it easy, driving, going around the house, like it was 5 star.
Thank you. Thank you, brother.
Yes, sir. I want to ask you about your W.E.B. Du Bois double consciousness concept, right? So early in the book, like first paragraph introduction, no role in society is more diverse than that of a cop. Feared and respected, insulted and embraced, viewed as both the glue keeping it together and the force breaking it apart. The heart of our civilization and the soul of its destruction. He is both the uniter and the divider, torn by a leadership that is neither secure and the disease it devastates. Tell me about your walk playing both of those worlds, man. Like how's this playing doing?
Yeah, it's like it's limbo, it's purgatory, man. Because again, the nation is divided in how they see police. Again, some see police as something very positive, some see police as something very negative. And as a black officer, you embody all of it. You understand? Um, to some, once you've crossed over, once you've worn that uniform, that's it. You're no longer invited to the Maroon Village. And for others, you know, you're an upstanding citizen all of a sudden. You know, I've had to travel, and I can spark a conversation with anyone. And certain folks, they're a little uncomfortable, but then eventually the conversation of, so what do you do with Cub? When I tell them, oh, I'm a police officer in New York, all of a sudden, you see them loosen up. You get to meet the real them. You understand? Because before that, I'm just a random black man with long dreadlocks. You understand? So, you know, people perceive things differently, and when you are a black cop, you embody 2 worlds essentially.
So tell me about your formatting choice with the book, right? So in this book, it's like a parallel at the same time. You're coming of age, a young man in New York, Haitian descent, everything you dealt with. At the same time, you're going back and forth to your policing, what you went through in day-to-day life. Tell me about writing it like that instead of doing a straight through, like chronological order.
Yeah, well, the thing is, most people don't know what it's like to be in a police department, to go to a police academy. So I wanted to pull the reader right in, right? I wanted them to hook them immediately as I walked them through my experiences, what I was experiencing when I first joined the police department, going through the training. But at the same time, there were certain things that had to be discussed that I felt it was important for them to understand, why I make certain decisions, why I see things the way that I see it. So you would have to understand and know the man, the person. And that's why, the odd number chapters were more of the present, and the even number chapters jumped back to the past so that it can essentially complement the upcoming chapter. So chapter 2 might have something in there that when I mention something in chapter 3, when I'm in the police academy, it makes a little bit more sense to you,
Bro, I read the book 3 times, right? I mean, basically, preparing. You just saying the odd and even thing, I didn't realize it was like literally like that. Like now I gotta go back to the book. Look at it again.
Yeah.
That's a bonus kind of thing you just gave right there. That's crazy. Now, was that a conscious choice or it just fell out?
Oh no, definitely a conscious choice. And I first saw that done when I read Asada's autobiography, 20 years ago almost.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I really love that because it also left you on a cliffhanger, like you were left on a cliffhanger, and then you would go, you get like a palate cleanse and go back to flashback 20 years before, 15 years before. So I enjoyed that, and I remember telling myself back then, if I ever wrote a book, I'd do the same format, and I did.
Let me dig in right there a little bit. So you were pretty much writing this book in the middle of doing a lot of things. I want to ask you about your writing process and like how do you structure time? Because as a writer myself, people always ask me like, I got a full-time job, I got a family, I'm juggling.
Yeah.
How did you make that happen?
Well, yeah. So before I knew I was writing a book, I was taking notes. For years, I've been taking notes on my iPhone, just writing in the notes app. And a lot of those notes ended up, making it right into the book. And I have to acknowledge my co-author. He helped me with the structure. Very talented individual, John Sternfeld. I have to acknowledge him also. But yeah, I was dedicated, man. It was a lot of work, a lot of work, a lot of work. Took 2 years, a little over 2 years to really get it down. And then the editing process. A lot of work goes into a book, especially a book of this magnitude.
So I know that when you're writing the book, you have a lot of content. Everything can't make it into the book. It's not possible. I love to ask my guests, what's something that's not in this book that you wish in hindsight, like, man, we could have found a way to do it?
Yeah, I think every author, there's several things that didn't make the final cut that I don't know. It's not coming to mind. But there was one main thing I'm like, why didn't I put that in the book? But I believe every author deals with that. Editing process is it's a little rough, man. It's a little difficult because it's emotional. You connect with the words, and sometimes I forget that certain things didn't make the final cut. There are times I've had conversations with folks, and when I reference something, they're like, "Wait, I don't remember reading that," forgetting that it was cut. You understand? But there's some things that I didn't even write in any of the drafts that should have made it. Also, one of the things is, and it lends more weight to the conversation on implicit bias. 6 months about 5 months out of the police academy, there was a black officer that was killed in Harlem by another officer. And I do wish I spoke on that because that was a concern of mine because I know I didn't look. I'm not Irish, Italian American. I don't look like a traditional cop. And I was afraid if I ever had to take any type of off-duty action. I was afraid of possibly being victimized by it in that way. And I don't think the department did enough to speak to implicit bias after that event, after that unfortunate incident. Rest in peace to the officer. Omar Edwards was his name.
Yeah. Rest in peace. Bless.
Yeah.
I love to ask my authors when they say that about the cutting room floor. So what do you plan to do with the things that didn't make it? Are you gonna do something else with that material, or what? The book is done. Forget about it. On to the next.
Yeah. Yeah. So rest in peace to my brother Michael K. Williams. Most people know him as Omar from The Wire.
Right.
We were working on something special. We were literally just waiting on the book. So it was bittersweet when I got the book deal because it was literally what we were waiting for. And it was just several months after he had passed. The plan is definitely to bring this story to Hollywood, not for entertainment purposes, but for education purposes. And for whatever reason, people taking information. For whatever reason, people taking information much faster when it's a narrative, when it's a dramatization.
Yeah.
What comes to mind is the Central Park 5 Exonerated 5 story.
Yeah. Come on.
There was a amazing documentary in 2012 about their story.
Yeah.
But most people didn't really know about them until 7 years later when They See Us came out on Netflix. It's a perfect example of how narratives work to really get the information out there.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? Speaking of that, I wanted to ask you earlier, my bad, on the comic part, we were talking about drawing and stuff like that. Do you imagine ever, with the explosion of that recently, could you imagine doing like a graphic novel or something at this part of your life? Or kind of like, that's kind of a...
I've actually thought about it. Now, in terms of actually illustrating it, I don't know. Because there's so much, I went to art high school. I know so many illustrators, so many people who have, gone into that career. It's a full-time career for them. So I like to spread the wealth, if you will. So I would probably tap one of my former classmates to do the illustration. But in terms of the graphic novel, that's definitely something I've considered. Definitely.
Because I'm realizing lately a lot of authors are taking their books and making an adaptation for young adults and things. But even as an adult, I love buying graphic novels and things. It's kind of, you get a condensed version of the main meat of whatever that book was, and it kind of sparks you to read the main book. So,
definitely,
yeah. So this is a literacy podcast. We're all about books. You mentioned earlier in the book about reading Malcolm X, Destruction of a Black Civilization. You just mentioned Asada Shakur, all of these content-heavy books you are reading. How did those materials shape you as a black man, identifying your culture, your pride in
Yeah,
your culture and yourself?
yeah.
What did those books do for you is my question.
Well, I'll tell you, prior to reading those books, I had already started asking myself a lot of the questions that the books answer. Right. So, a good friend of mine, former coworker, his name is Bishop, he started providing some of the books, and then I started going into my own journey. Um, but it was uplifting because again, these issues started really frustrating me because I started really paying attention to socioeconomics, the condition of black folks throughout this nation, really throughout this world. And I had a deep appetite in trying to understand why is it that you could spin the globe and wherever you stop, if there's a darker population, they will be the proletariat. They will be the ones at the bottom. That bothered me, man. It bothered me a lot. I know we deserved better, but I didn't know how it got that way. And again, these questions had already been answered by the generations before, and thankfully they left the work. They left the notes for us in their work.
You're right. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
So my follow-up to that is, do you think it was an advantage having that consciousness going into the police academy, or was it a disadvantage? And I ask because I got conscious after the military, right? But I imagine if I knew what I knew in the military, I'd have probably gotten more trouble just knowing, like, I would see things like clear as day. Like, I'm not
Mm.
going for it. It would have been
I, I
harder for me.
yeah. Well, I see it as an advantage only because without that training, without the fortifying of my mind, it's possible I would have just gone with the flow like so many other brothers and sisters. Like I said, most people they don't sign up for a mission, they sign up for a job. Without that training, I probably would have just signed up for a job. But thankfully, I was a man on a mission.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And let's go right into the academy right now, my brother. So you mentioned earlier in the book about your early black man police interaction in New York. So what made you say in the beginning, like, you know what, I'm gonna go and be an officer? What was your initial thought?
And becoming an officer.
Yes, sir.
Well,
Like,
it,
yeah, your
it,
mindset. Like, I'm gonna go and do this.
yeah, the way that I was being treated, because I grew up in a rough area, but I wasn't down with a lot of the things that were happening in the area, and yet I was being treated as if I was, and I didn't understand. I mean, I knew I was black, and I understood racism somewhat, as a teenager, but the way I was being treated, and then paying attention to the fact that it's really not just me, the way that we get treated, because of who we are, because of who our ancestors were, who our ancestors are. Um, yeah, that inspired me to join rather than deter me from joining.
So once you go into the academy, I love your detailed breakdown on, like, the mindset they're trying to instill inside of you from the beginning, from the academy, the structure, right? The paramilitary, as we talk about. This is what it is.
Yeah.
And they're churning out all of these, like a factory, a machine that's turning out products. They're turning out thousands of these officers, man. Talk about some of the mindset stuff in the academy when you initially got on the force you were dealing with.
Well, overall, law enforcement is a very conservative environment, like very conservative culture politically. So a lot of that conservatism is built into the policy. It's built in, it's in the culture. So you start absorbing it in different ways. Again, the good thing with me is my mind was strong. I observed it, I acknowledged it, but I didn't absorb it thankfully. But people will start absorbing it. It starts changing who you are, how you see the world. And experience should do that, right? But when it's indoctrination, that's where it becomes a problem because it might not be the right information, and yet you're adhering to it. You're making it part of your makeup, your spiritual makeup, your physical makeup. Your thoughts, and yeah, that's why I took the reader through that journey of just better understanding my peers in the police academy. Also, there's about 1,200 of us, 11 to 1,200 of us, and overwhelmingly they were white males, and they were on equal footing with me. Most black people don't really know what that feels like, especially at work. The last time most of us had experienced that was probably in school. because we're all just students. But when it's time to work, the white folks are usually the boss. And don't get me wrong, the white folks were the boss, but a great deal of them were also peers. And that was a very important journey for me also because, the inferiority complex that can breed when the power dynamic is always one way. Thankfully, I didn't have that issue either. So, no one, I didn't think I was better than anyone, but I also knew no one was better than me, if that makes sense. I wasn't automatically impressed just because someone was Caucasian, something that sadly I've observed people, our people, non-white folks, like there's this deference automatically given to white folks because of the power dynamic. You understand? I didn't have that issue.
Now you mentioned in the book something about your locks. You being an automatic target from the higher up because of your locks, you maintain your locks. Tell me why. I know folks that kids did. They had long hair and they went to their academy and they cut their hair.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to like, you know what, despite all whatever y'all doing, I'm maintaining who I am in my culture.
Yeah, that was my first fight, man. And I had to make it clear that no, like diversity shouldn't just be cosmetic, right? If you want me here, right? If you're saying that I belong here because I do, you got to accept me for who I really am, and my locks and different things about me. And it's not just that, but other officers who are not part of the dominant society that might have certain things in terms of their spirituality or other ethnic differences that are different from Occidental society. If you really want to make a place diverse, it's not just be happy we gave you a job and shut up and get in line. No, you got to fully embrace people. You got to fully take people for who they are. You understand? And that was me making a very firm statement that I'm unapologetic in who I am, and whatever I have to go through, I will.
We have a question from the chat. I love my chat, very intelligent chat. My brother said, for nine, talked about third person consciousness concerning the physical body, the black body, and a historical social context. What is your perspective on negation of the black body in your work? That being your former police work. The negation of the black body.
I mean, listen, it's why I got involved. I mean, it's why I even joined. But having front row seats to it did something to me. I didn't like just going to central booking where after the arrest where you're taken downtown. I remember researching slave ships, and that's what the cells looked like. It was unbelievable because of the over policing. There was no space to put the inmates. There was no space to put the prisoners, and it literally looked like a slave ship. And some people might say, well, they had it coming. Who told them to to break the law? But then you start seeing what they're there for: jumping the turnstile, not paying the fare, smoking a little weed, maybe open container alcohol. They're not there for anything serious. I mean, some people are sure, but overwhelmingly, you don't get that many people packed in a cage for serious things. It's innocuous, innocuous infractions that happen across the city, across racial demographics, right? The number one reason that people are arrested and summons for decades is marijuana and open container, respectively. Substance abuse, essentially. These are things that occur in higher rates in white areas. One that, remember, the disposable income is there. Socioeconomically speaking, there's more disposable income in amongst white folks to indulge in more substances, and much stronger substances at that. But these are the reasons that people overwhelmingly end up in handcuffs and put in cages. So it did a lot to me to have to watch that. And it's not to say, you don't address conditions, but automatically coming with a hammer, putting people in cage. Like, if you cage a human being, let it be something serious, please.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I want to connect with that because I want to ask you about your research. I'm starting the research. As you're sitting there policing, you go into a person's file, like, what they here for? You start looking into it, like, like that shouldn't even happen. That shouldn't even be like that. And the average cop wouldn't even take the time to do that, is my question. Like, tell me what sparked your mind, start looking and start digging. Like, what started that process?
Yeah, so as your seniority increases, your assignments are supposed to get better. But that didn't happen with me. I can see, no matter how much my seniority increased, I kept having to do prisoner transports, which is typically reserved for rookies. But I turned it into a positive by surveying each prisoner. I started asking them, how'd you get here? What happened? And overwhelmingly, I'm talking about 98%, because I was a transit cop, 98% was $2.50 not paying the fare. A parking summons is about 45, starts at about $45. If you divide that 250 into that, would you feel that it's justified, to lock up that many people? Like, think about what a parking summons is worth. So is it justified to keep locking up people for $2.50? Are there other ways? You know what I'm saying? And but I started seeing the pattern, and I would watch the officers to see which officers were arresting them. And these are people that I knew personally, and I knew most of them were not bad people at all. But that's when I realized, as long as this remains what the system demands, most people will acquiesce and go with the flow. It's human nature to kind of, like, most people will go with the flow. That's just what it is. So that's when I realized, instead of trying to get individuals, right, every individual, and there's 36,000 cops in the New York City Police Department, instead of trying to get every individual to go with to go against the current, I figured, how about we just change the way the current flows? Because they're going to go with it anyway. So that's when I realized we got to aim high. We got to aim to the top. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now,
so much of police reform advocacy is aimed at the individual officer, right? They don't pay attention to why the officer behaves in that way, and it's not their fault. They don't know to think about it that way. This is part of the reason why, I wanted to make it clear in the memoir. When we basically hold a particular officer accountable, it is what it is. That's part of how we get justice. But we're missing the forest for the trees if we don't then zoom out and look at a macro perspective of the issue.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let's get to some terms, man. I love breaking down things for people that might not know. Tell us about broken window theory, and then how that goes with the cop and frisk that we heard about, and then ultimately to these quotas, like chasing numbers and chasing stats, basically. Tell us
Yeah.
about
So the terminology is quota-driven broken windows policing, right? And what that means is broken windows is an idea born in the 80s that says that if you enforce the minor things, then the bigger things will sort themselves out. Um, I mean, every now and then, right? If you're arresting everybody just for breathing, you will get someone with an illegal gun. You will get someone that's probably wanted. But for every one or two people that you get for something serious, or that has something more serious happening in their background, it's literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands who have to get over policed. And the externality, the collateral damage, if you will, is not considered because the people damaged look like me and you, right? Such blanket policing, such fishnet policing would never be accepted in Caucasian areas, right? All of a sudden it becomes surgical again. And, and so the thinking is, by over enforcing small things, we stop big things. And to ensure that officers are continuously over enforcing small things, we give them a quota, we give them pressure. And in a nutshell, this is what leads to a lot of the issues that we have seen in the last 3 decades.
I've told my friends for years I travel a lot as well. When I'm in a quote unquote wealthy area, I never see like even one plaza.
Hmm.
I'm saying it's not there. It's not like when I'm in our area. There's like
Yeah,
the block dumping. Like, man, we even say,
yeah,
man, it's hot out here today, man. It's hot. The block's hot. Like, you never say that
yeah,
when you over there.
yeah.
you
And
know?
and the way they justify that is, well, there's no murders happening over there, so there's no need for cops to be present. And there's some truth to that. Like, it personally, right? My issue is not seeing the cops. It's what the cops are pressured to do. Right? If the cops were there with omnipresence, and they had their autonomy to take action and address conditions properly, right? The way that the conditions addressed should match whatever the infraction is. I don't think most people have an issue with that. The problem is when officers are there and they're being pressured to operate in a particular fashion. And the problem is people don't know officers being pressured to operate this way. They think the officers are acting autonomously, which is why, again, the review the reform is mostly aimed at officers' individual actions, not enough on the systemic issues that lead to those actions.
Now let's take that go to you. You try to go for promotion. You score in a high percentile of your peer group. Amazing work you're doing, but they find ways to nitpick you for not making numbers, not making calls. And the whole book leading up to it, they're kind of trying to tell you on the side, like, man, you want some numbers? Man, we need some
Mhm.
numbers, but they're not going for it. Talk about the backlash of not playing the game.
Yeah, I mean the retaliation. It starts. It rises. It starts with the conversations. It starts with one moment. Can you hear the noise? The background. Yeah. So it starts with the conversation with your supervisor, which is uncomfortable, and then you start realizing little things like days off requested not being approved, overtime requested not being granted. Um, you start getting those assignments like transporting prisoners, guarding, staying with deceased persons, dead bodies, things that are relegated mainly for rookies. You start having to do a lot of that stuff, and if you still somehow don't adjust, you go through what's called team-led enforcement, which is where the supervisor takes you out and forces you to arrest someone for something terrible, right? And when I say terrible, I'm talking about minor, right? Like there was one supervisor that if you didn't get your own enforcement activity, as it was referred to, he would take you out across from a gas station, and anyone who pumps their gas but doesn't fully put on their seatbelt before they drive, you would have to write them a seatbelt sentence. So even if the seatbelt is on by the time they get to the street, if they put the car in drive and start to move and that seatbelt is not fully buckled, you would have to write that summons, which is a disgusting way of policing. And that was his message of, if you don't want to write these summonses, make sure you get your own, because if you come out with me, this is what we're doing. And if somehow team-led enforcement still doesn't make you get on board, that's when they hit you in your evaluations. And now it's permanent. Now you are going to struggle when you put in for units. Now you're going to struggle when it's time for promotions. Now you're going to struggle when you make requests, even if it's a request to work in a different precinct or a different shift, right? Everything you do, that negative evaluation will always be dangled on top of your head as a reason as to why you didn't get selected. It's just certain things didn't get approved, right? Your career is basically done.
And let's talk about the culture. So while this is happening, your peers are like, man, just go ahead and just do it, man. Man, just go ahead and just get some numbers, just get some. Pretty much like you said, just go with it. Come on, man,
Yeah,
just do
and I want to be clear, man. They said that out of love, man. They were watching what I was going through, and it was difficult for them. They know I wasn't a bad person, and it was difficult for them to watch that. So they said it out of love. They said it out of concern. But again, I didn't sign up for a job. I signed up for a mission. I didn't think I would have to be a whistleblower now. I thought I was going to rise through the ranks, right? Police properly, and therefore there could be some sort of empirical example as to why we don't have to over police nonsense in the hopes that it stops the bigger things. I wanted to be, again, the living embodiment of that in the precinct that I was responsible for. Things happened differently. I was forced to put on some armor and go into this battle.
So let's go into the battle right now, man. So ultimately, you become a part of the infamous NYPD 12 in a massive lawsuit you have against the NYPD. In a New York Times article, you the cover of this movement. Your name is associated with this thing directly. Tell me how scary it was to make that choice, man. You know for a fact once I do this, and I'm still trying to work over here every day, like you in
Yeah.
the lion den, man.
You know what, man? I'll tell you, it's one thing that I'm grateful for. There was no fear. I had completely transcended fear. It was one of the most liberating feelings of my life. I you know, what is your write-up, right? If I've accepted the ultimate consequence, which is my life, what is your suspension? What is you firing me? All that fear went away. It was one of the most liberating feelings I've ever experienced in my life. There was no more fear, my brother. I was ready for whatever the consequence was going to be. Um, it was liberating.
So for those that's watching the podcast right now, there's a Hulu documentary, "Crime and Punishment is Awarded." You got to go and check it out. But you will see my brother and his peers as they're doing the day to day, the footage and everything you was capturing. Tell me about that. You capturing audio. You go into these evaluations, talking to the brass.
Yeah,
You literally recording.
yeah,
Tell me about like dealing with that. Like we talking about some major stuff.
yeah. So I paid attention to one of the important stop and frisk lawsuits, federal lawsuits called Floyd versus the City of New York. And every time somebody from the police department testified, they just all they did was lie, right? And I remember the conversations they were having with me, and I remember thinking, if I ever had to go to court or ever had to defend myself, I needed to be able to make sure that I captured what the truth is, what I'm being told. So it wasn't an easy decision. It's not a decision. It's not something that I enjoy doing, but I had to capture the conversation. So I started recording the supervisors, all the way up to the 3-star chiefs. And, you know, New York City Police Department has over 50,000 employees. A 3-star chief answers to the chief of department, which is the 4-star, and the police commissioner. That's it. A 3-star chief has a lot of power. To record 3-star chiefs is literally career suicide. But again,
Yes, sir.
all fear was behind me.
So you talking about it in detail in the book is one thing, but watching the documentary, you playing the
Yeah.
case is like that was very different. But once
Yeah.
again, you had the choice to do. He said he had no fear, but seeing some of the other people, what they was dealing with, even physically, having physical ailments, even emotionally. Man, the sister was pregnant, man, almost induced her labor and whatnot. The effect on your
Yeah.
physical body, the stress. That is saying, man, we don't have stress pills, man. That's
Yeah.
tremendous.
Yeah, man. Listen, and then despite not being fearful of anything, I can't say it didn't take its toll on me mentally, man. This wasn't an easy battle at all. This was very, very, very difficult. But I was willing to do it, and people, what people didn't understand was my motivating factor wasn't myself, right? Because if it was, self-preservation wouldn't allow me to take even one step. My motivating factor, my brother, is you. You know what I mean? It's the people listening and watching this interview. It's people I'll never meet. It's the people on the receiving ends of oppression. It's the people, the proletariat. I think of Fidel Castro during the 1960 United Nations General Assembly. It's an annual meeting that happens here in Manhattan. Um, all the world leaders stay at the Waldorf Astoria, right? Very prestigious hotel. Castro stayed at the Teresa Hotel in Harlem, and the famous picture with him and Malcolm X was there. And he said, "These are my people," right? That's how I feel. Take me to where the poor people are. Those are my people. And understanding who we are, what we come from, what we've been through. That's what motivates me, and that's what allows me to do this work. But again, it doesn't mean that it hasn't taken its toll on me.
So let me go into that bag. I deal with the mental health a lot. That's my bag, mental health. Um, what did you do at the time, and even what you do like currently, as far as your mental health, emotional, keeping yourself together? How do you handle that? It's
Yeah.
immense pressure.
I mean, listen, a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, um, eventually therapy, but not at the time. And I was just the mission, man, being just focused on the mission. It that I had the light was bright at the end of the tunnel, so I just kept going towards it. You know. Yeah.
Another powerful question from the chat. Do you believe
Okay.
that fighting for equality in a society where equality doesn't exist is a fight for better conditions under oppression? Is there a fight for better conditions under oppression?
You see, the thing is, I don't think it's to no end, right? So, thank you for that comment and question, because what it speaks to is incremental success. And some people, because it's incremental, they might feel it's not worth it. I disagree, man. It all adds up. It's like, think of a bodybuilder, man. Literally, you're tearing muscles microscopically, but you keep at it, you become a bodybuilder. And one of the things, one of the analogies that I use in the documentary is that I've always seen this work as a patchwork quilt, where every generation has an objective to add its portions of onto the quilt. And the objective is for the quilt to get big enough to insulate us all from the cold airs of oppression. I think we have to continue the work, right? Because do we have a lot more work to do? Yes. But for those that have done it for the things that we take for granted today, if we don't continue to work, it's as if their work is in vain. It's as if their sacrifice is in vain. So even though it's incremental and slow moving, we got to keep going. Think of a tugboat versus a Navy, aircraft carrier. You understand? Look at the size difference. But the tugboat can get it into the right direction. We're the tugboat. We're pulling on a big system, but again, out of respect for the people that have done it before us, who believe that we were worth it, we have to believe that the posterity behind us is also worth it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So ultimately, they dismissed the case. Unfortunately, they dismissed it, right? And you feel like ultimately,
yeah. No, I was saying the case. They dismissed it, but we refound it, and it's like this tit for tat, man. And listen, I was never here for the money, so. As long as there's air going through these lungs, I'm here. This case is going to go. So it is what it is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So ultimately, you decide to leave the police force. You know what? I'm going to make change from outside the machine instead of inside the machine. You worked so hard to be an officer and to be a great one. How difficult was it to leave, first of all? But second of all, tell me about you stepping into the political arena and making that choice.
Yeah, man. Listen, it was a very difficult decision. I worked very hard, and I was in a very good position. I retired. I couldn't have retired out of a better position. Thankfully, there was a chief that paid attention and saw my value. And when I didn't win the election, because I ran for office unsuccessfully 3 years ago, she had a position waiting for me. So, I appreciate her more than she would ever know. But it wasn't an easy decision, and I worked very hard to get here. And, you read about how impoverished my childhood was. Right, so, being a lieutenant in the police department, you're paid very well, but I wanted to fast track this information getting out there, and I felt the best way to do that was with this memoir. If there was a way that I could have written a memoir and stayed in my position, I would have, but you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to write a book without permission, and there was no way they were going to give me permission to write the type of book that I wanted. Yeah. Wow. So that's why I had to pivot. Again, it was not an easy decision. It wasn't an easy decision.
Yes, sir. Yeah. You mentioned in the book, whenever you decide to make your political run, you're trying to get endorsements, you're trying to get with people to align, and they want you to play the game once again. It's a different game, but it's always a game.
That's too, man.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, my consultants, it's like, if you really understand who I am, you shouldn't even be having this conversation with me. I don't play the game, man. I didn't play the game. I didn't go with the flow when I was surrounded by crack cocaine and everything else you could imagine. I didn't go with the flow when I was surrounded by, unconstitutional policing. What makes you think I'm gonna go with the flow just to get into office? That's not who I am. You understand? But it's not their fault. Most people do go with the flow. I think some people, they have a hard time accepting that there are people that don't play games, man.
So I believe Malcolm X said, whenever we see certain people get put to the spotlight, to the front, we should be more conscious, aware of them, and be mindful of them.
Yeah.
As they're getting that thrust. After your experience, once again, dealing with it, You find more confirmation in that? Like, you know what? I see what he was saying.
Yeah, yeah. And listen, it's not to say that there aren't good people in politics doing
Yeah,
good
yeah,
work,
yeah, yeah,
but they should be they should understand where if they're watched with scrutiny and criticism, because unfortunately we literally have a term called it's politics, right? And the reason why that exists is because it's politics.
politics. Right. So let's talk about that a little bit more. I want to ask you about black people in position of power. I mean, we think of policing at work, politics. We all think, well, if we're the ones up top, it'll be good.
Yeah,
Let's talk about the myth of that. Like,
yeah.
it's not really always the case, but most times it's not the case, actually.
So yeah, I refer to that in the memoir as cosmetic diversity, right? The surface might be one thing, but it doesn't mean the system is changing. You can change the hardware all day. If you're using the same operating system and software, you're going to get the same results. And in some ways, it's even more dangerous because now they've put it in blackface. You understand? So now they put a stamp of legitimacy to it, or they've validated and vindicated for treating us this way, because even when we're in charge, we continue to be treated that way. You understand? And yeah, cosmetic diversity has never been it. What we've always needed is the diversity of thought, right? We need people that who are dynamic, people who are willing to challenge the status quo, people who are visionaries, who can see, who can envision what a future can look like and do the work to get there to make it tangible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I want to ask you about this concept. I interviewed the author Salvador Smiley a month ago. His wonderful book called Defund. Amazing book, awesome information. What's your idea about defunding the police and different kind of abolition movements of that sort? Give me your professional thought.
Yeah. So ultimately, ideologically, a society in which police are not necessary, that should be the goal. That should always, we got to aim high to see how far we can actually get. Right. So that should always be the goal. But there has to be a really realistic approach to get there. Right. And what that is sounds different to different people. The difference between me and a lot of other folks, especially abolitionists, is I'm not in despair and in a state of cynicism because I've seen behind the curtain. I believe it can work. I just believe we haven't been pushing the right buttons. And I'll be honest, had I not had 15 years of an internal perspective, I probably wouldn't have this viewpoint at all. It comes from being in there, knowing the potential is real. But also, I believe police work out of title more often than they should. So if we have to take some of the funds and reallocate it to existing agencies, or even create agencies that don't exist so that they can respond to certain non-emergencies, I'm all for that too. So it's not defunding to the point of depleting and abolishing, but I do support reallocating funds and taking so many responsibilities outside the hands of police.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much for that. I got two last questions. I'm gonna get you up out of here. Two questions, man. First question: we all witnessed the horrible, the murder of Sonia, nasty, that whole situation. The police officer. What's your professional thoughts on a matter like that? Whenever we see these atrocities every year, every few months, I mean, what
Yeah, it
do you
hurts.
think?
Yeah, it hurts, man. And, it's not. I know. I'm not supposed to internalize it, but
Yeah.
it bothers me to my core because it makes me feel like I'm not working hard enough. Like I feel like I have an antidote, and I'm not making sure it gets to where it needs to. I feel like I take it very personal, because I feel like I'm not working hard enough. It's very difficult watching that video. It bothers me a lot. Like I'm getting choked up. Like, brother, I'm tired of it, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We all.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm
Nah.
tired. And I speak to my heritage. We don't come from docile people that sit and just take this. I'm trying to prevent some shit. All right. I need people to understand that. Just look at the Haitian Revolution. Look at Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey. We don't come from people that just sit and take this stuff. I don't know how long they expect us to do this. They would never sit and take this stuff. Any little injustice they think they feel, you see what they do. Right? We see what just happened in Tennessee. We see what happened in Charlottesville. All right, like how long do they expect us to just take this shit? So when those situations happen, it motivates me to work harder. But man.
Yes, sir. Yeah. My dear sister, Dr. Wade, asked the question, what advice do you have for others that want to be in law enforcement? Any up-and-coming people who want to be officers, what's your advice to the youth?
Fortify your mind so you can remain grounded in who you are. Fortify your mind so you can remain grounded in who you are. And, I will leave you with a quote from Thomas Sankara. In French, I'll say it in English. It's a quote I share with a lot of people. He said, we must choose between champagne for a few or water for all, And I tell people, always choose water. Always make the decision that benefits the collective. You have a right to live your life, right? So there are times that you have to know when to be selfish, but overall, always choose water.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In closing, I want you to wrap this up on your own. You got a lot of platforms, a lot of podcasts, a lot of TV shows, radio. What do you think that you want to say about this book, about this project? You haven't been able to say about this project. What do you want to say you haven't been able to get off? Get it off.
Honestly, I want people to really give it a chance, man. So many people who have read it, they're like, man, I apologize. I thought this was propaganda. They've apologized because they were reluctant to take it in. They didn't think there would be any value because, if anything, you're a sellout for even joining the police department. That's not what this is at all. So I really want people to give it a chance.
Thank you very, very much for your time. I know you have prior engagements and opportunities. Yeah. Thanks for giving me and my audience the opportunity to hear your voice directly. And yes, please go out there. I give it 5 stars, man. Inconvenient Cop. Thank you very much. Thank y'all for your time, audience. See y'all next time on the Sean P. Experience.
All right.
Bless.
Thank you, my brother. Love.
Peace.